Over the years there's been many meatheads, mercenaries and maniacs that James Bond has battled, and it's time to discuss some of the best. Hey people, my name's Jim and you have landed on Planet Rewind, and on Mondays on this channel I talk about James Bond, all things James Bond, and we're going to be talking about the Bond Henchman in this video, because Bond, every time he gets a mission, he always goes up against obviously this world dictator, crazy guy, but there's always some big, rugged or intelligent or calculating people that he's got to knock off on the way, and some of the most entertaining parts of a Bond film. Sometimes the henchmen are the best part. So let's talk about some of the best. So first I'm going to talk about Red Grant from Russia with Love, played by Robert Shaw. And he was basically the James Bond of the terrorist organisation Spectre, whose Bond is pursuing. Obviously headed by one of Bond's most memorable villains, Blofeld. He was basically the James Bond of Spectre. He was the James Bond unleashed by Spectre to take out James Bond. And what I love about Robert Renshaw's performance as Grant is it is such a cold performance. It is such a calculating performance. He has waited his whole life for this moment to meet James Bond and find out whether he is better than him, whether he can take him, and he knows his stuff. He's an extremely intriguing character because he's very intelligent. And at the start of the film you see that he's on this kind of training course to kill James Bond, and he's been doing this for years. So when he eventually reaches James Bond, he's supremely confident. He confronts him on a train in one of From Russia with Love's best sequences. Very menacing sequence, very claustrophobic sequence. It's literally them in a single train carriage having this cold as ice, cut the tension with a knife confrontation and discussion, with both actors knocking it out the park, and then they have a fight on that train, which Bond obviously eventually wins. But Robert Shaw, for me, he is probably the most James Bond henchman who believed he could beat Bond the most, like, because he had been building up to it. Like, all the others are like, who's this git? Yeah, I'll go and get him for your boss. But Robert Shaw was like, I'm going to beat James Bond. I mean, the only person I would compare to that in terms of Bond villains is probably Scaramanga, played by Christopher Lee from The Man with the Golden Gun. He was always preparing to meet Bond, but this is the henchman. So this is the most henchman who thought, I've got a shot with James Bond. And that scene is one of the most intense of all the Bond movies, and it shows that obviously in the early Bond films you could still make meticulous, well-crafted set pieces. Even in such an early stage in the franchise, that stands up to the best of James Bond today. And next up is kind of an obvious one, but you've got to mention it because he is great. It's Oddjob, played by Harold Sakata, who was a former wrestler turned actor. And his English wasn't great, but that kind of, for me, that kind of, the way that he was like cut off, it almost seemed like he worked for the villain Goldfinger. It almost seemed like even Goldfinger couldn't really talk to Oddjob. But, it was almost like Oddjob just had a tunnel vision. He just knows, I work for Goldfinger, and whatever he says goes. And that's what he is. And obviously he's got that incredibly unique selling point of his lethal hat. Most people make fun of it today because it's been parodied in the Austin Powers movies. But at the time, Oddjob would have been so menacing. Oddjob would have been so impressive as a character and so unique. And I feel like many henchmen have followed in Oddjob's footsteps. I feel Harold Sakata put such an ice cold performance, such a memorable look with the suit and the hat and just that cold stare. But also there's a smugness to Oddjob. What I love about whenever Sean Connery fights him, he'll like throw bricks at him, he'll throw stuff at him, and Oddjob will just like smile and everything will bounce off him. So he also had this kind of superiority over James Bond, and I think he kind of looked at Bond as it was going to be an easy challenge, and obviously it wasn't, but Bond had to do, he didn't beat him with his bare hands. He had to use his intellect to beat him. He had to make a plan to beat Oddjob. So Oddjob is probably one of the most villains who could have defeated James Bond if, you know, if situation had been different, if Sean Connery hadn't used his brain. Mayday, played by Grace Jones. Yes, we've got to have some hench women in here as well. Now, we all know Grace Jones was an absolute phenomenon in the 80s. This actress and this musician was everywhere. And I feel she's one of those actors and personalities that she's just magnetic. She's a magnetic character, Grace Jones. And she's one of those personalities that you struggle to work out what is for show, what is part of her shtick. And she always kept people guessing. And Mayday was a great example of that. You know, she's basically Christopher Walken's Bond villain's henchwoman. And she steals the show in The View to a Kill, I think. I think it was a masterstroke casting Grace Jones, because she just, as a woman, as a presence, you know, she was such a progressive character for an 80s Bond film, because she was strong. She was literally no nonsense. She could beat any of the men in the film whatsoever who opposed her, including James Bond. You know, she's that effective. She's that powerful. She's that strong. And I love the way she's portrayed in A View to a Kill. I love Grace Jones' performance, very charismatic. Obviously, she has that awkward as hell sex scene with Roger Moore. I don't know why we find it so weird to see Roger Moore in bed with Grace Jones. They just don't look like a sexually compatible pair. I don't know, guys. And I feel like her fight scenes were great. Her chemistry with Christopher Walken was great. This kind of weird relationship going on where Christopher Walken's character, he's pretty much using her, but he's convinced her he loves her. And she's kind of knows that he's not to be trusted, and she's trying to break out of that, but she's a villain herself. Eventually she obviously turns good. So there was such a journey for Mayday in A View to a Kill, and I wish she hadn't have died. I feel like the henchman I'm about to talk about, Jaws, it would have been great to see Mayday come back. I think she could have been a great reoccurring character in the series. Next is, of course, Jaws, played by Richard Kiel. What a fascinating character to come up with. On paper it sounds bonkers, it sounds mental. Just metal teeth. Yeah, that's what it is, this massive, crazy looking guy with metal teeth.
I might have guessed.
Do you know him?
Not socially. His name's Jaws, he kills people.
Richard Kiel really did have a screen presence. He really did, and the way they shoot Jaws, he shows up in 2 Bond movies, Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker. The way they shoot him, you know, always being sure to show his height, his kind of imposing stature on Bond. Whenever Roger Moore fights him, it looks like Roger Moore's a child compared. But the thing about Jaws is he has got a heart, because we learn in Moonraker, one of the many maniacal things that happens in Moonraker, nutty things, is he falls in love with this charming, sweet little girl he meets. Like, what the hell, guys? Jaws should not be buying people flowers, but he ends up doing it. He ends up falling in love with this girl. And despite me not thinking that we should have Jaws fall in love, I do find it quite adorable, their relationship. I don't agree with it. I think Jaws should have stayed an ice cold villain. But it was just nice to see this kind of misfit, maniacal man find his heart and fall in love with this nice woman. It was silly though, like, why is that in a James Bond film? Baron Samedi, played by Geoffrey Holder. Now, what makes me remember Baron Samedi as much as the film Live and Let Die is that you could get him in GoldenEye the video game, you could get Oddjob in GoldenEye the video game, you could get Jaws. I love how they put that in, because I already had a real appreciation for these henchmen, but including him in that game, that iconic game which pretty much changed gaming, it really crystallised them in my head. And that goes for all of these, but it applies to Baron Samedi most. I remember just seeing him in that GoldenEye game being fascinated. He is from Live and Let Die, the voodoo James Bond film, the one set in Jamaica, where Roger Moore makes his debut and he has to engage with all this voodoo magic. It was all arranged in films in the 70s, and an almost all black cast. There's a lot of white people in it, but it's almost all black to kind of reflect the kind of filmmaking that was going on at the time. It sounds like a strange concept to take James Bond and put it into that kind of filmmaking that was going on, but it really works. It's James Bond out of his comfort zone in a real new setting, and obviously he gets confronted by complete and utter nutty bastards like Baron Samedi. Look at this man. He is a state. He is mental. And the thing about Baron Samedi, he doesn't do anything in Live and Let Die, and he's a henchman. He doesn't do anything. All he does is hang around, laugh madly, and alert the villain of when Bond is there. But it's just the look of him, the style of him, the visual, and that disturbing laugh which creeps me out. That was enough for me. Bond didn't have to fight him. Bond didn't have to confront him. I like how he was always looming in the shadows. And at the end of Live and Let Die, he's sat on the train laughing. He's pursuing Bond on the train. I always remember that image. It freaked me out as a kid. And this guy, you know, he's a reflection of the dark forces. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't, but he's got that added element to him. And I kind of like how Bond never fought him, because it gives Baron Samedi that mystery, keeps him in the shadows. He never came back in a Bond film, so I don't know what happened when he was on that train. Did he just decide, you know what, I just won't fight Bond? Or did he fight Bond and Bond beat him? So Bond beat Baron Samedi. I don't know. We kind of get an unwritten path for Baron Samedi, which is good because you can kind of create it in your mind. Maybe Bond had this crazy struggle with him where he invoked these crazy bats and demons to fight James Bond. And it's another henchwoman, Famke Janssen. I hope I pronounced that correctly, but she was Xena Onatopp. She was the woman who used sex to kill her victims in GoldenEye, and she tried it on Pierce Brosnan's Bond, but he wasn't having it, you know. But she would strangle men with her thighs. So what I love about Xena Onatopp, she was clearly insane. She was completely and utterly bonkers. But the actress gave such a charismatic performance. The actress gave such a personality performance. And she's pretty much, in performance-wise, on the level of anyone in the movie. She's so memorable. It was kind of an interesting take that she would use her sexuality to kill men. To, you know, very much show exercising power over them by getting them to want her sexually and then using that to kill them. You know, that was her power. It wasn't a gun, it wasn't a knife, it was her thighs, those bloody thighs. Really love her chemistry with Pierce Brosnan. I think they have an electric chemistry. They obviously never have a love scene because that would be it for Bond if he ever got in between those thighs. It would be a good night, but it wouldn't end well.
Always did enjoy a good squeeze.
Finally, I want to talk about Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd from Diamonds Are Forever. They've always been an interesting team of henchmen for me. I've always kind of, now and again I like them, now and again I don't. I've decided I like them because they're just so uncomfortably sinister. You know, they kind of go about their killings and their stalking and their operations in this really kind of pleasant way. They've got a pleasant demeanour about them, but they've got an underlying menace about them as well. They're polite to everyone, they're kind to everyone, but they're deep down inside monsters, and they're, you know, you're very edgy when you're around them, but you also could be lulled into a false sense of security because they look like normal people. They look like regular people on the street, but they just have this something going on behind the eyes. They just don't mind killing. They're good at killing. And they had this thing where they would finish each other's sentences, and just the way these two actors bounced off each other was so mysterious. You know, and a lot of people kind of speculated that they were a gay couple. I think it is confirmed that they were a gay couple, which was very kind of forward thinking for the 70s.
Stop right there. Who are you?
Dr. Tynan sent us.
Why didn't he come himself?
He was taken sick. Bitten by the bug. He sent this for you.
If God had wanted man to fly,
He would have given him wings, Mr. Kid.
There are so many ways that these characters off their victims. They blow people up, they drown them, they use scorpions to poison them, so they enjoy the killing. You know, these Bond henchmen who really enjoy what they're doing. They enjoy the chase. They kind of engage with it how everyone else engages with their regular day. It's all normal to them. It's normality. That's why they act polite and they're pleasant and they're almost normal. But it's just the fact they're enjoying this terrible thing makes them so sinister and strange, and you want to know what's going on behind the eyes. There you have it. There's some of the main Bond henchmen in James Bond. There are others, but I just wanted to talk about a few. Let me know in the comments your favourite James Bond henchman. Let me know your thoughts on this list. Who is your favourite James Bond villain henchman of all time? And let me know if you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing if you love nostalgic movie content. Come back next week for another James Bond video, and stick around throughout the week on this channel because I'm going to be reviewing The Breakfast Club on Wednesday, and on Friday I'm going to be ranking the Terminator movies. Thanks for watching once again everyone, and I'll see you guys next time.